Ezekiel stepped into the velvet fork, every inch of him radiating confidence. His suit was sharp, his posture commanding, yet the moment he crossed the threshold, the air shifted. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Eyes followed him, some curious, others judgmental. A waiter paused mid-step, tray in hand, staring just a second too long before looking away. Ezekiel felt it all, the weight of their stares pressing down on him like an invisible force. He knew this feeling well, the assumption that someone like him didn't belong here, in a place where exclusivity wasn't just about money, but also skin color. At a nearby table, two older women exchanged glances. One leaned closer to her companion and whispered, "He looks lost. Do you think he's meeting someone?" Her voice carried just enough for Ezekiel to catch it, though she likely thought otherwise. He clenched his jaw briefly but kept walking, refusing to let their whispers shake him. This wasn't new territory for him. He'd faced worse. But today wasn't about proving himself. It was supposed to be business as usual. Or so he thought. Ryan Caldwell noticed Ezekiel almost immediately. The young waiter smirked as he approached, muttering under his breath loud enough for a few nearby staff members to hear. Another one trying to play rich. It was subtle enough to deny later if confronted, but the malice behind it was unmistakable. Ezekiel heard it too, though he gave no outward sign. Instead, he stopped at an empty table and waited patiently for service. When Ryan finally reached him, his tone was syrupy sweet, laced with condescension. "Good evening, sir," he said, dragging out the word sir, as if it were both a title and an insult. "Can I help you with anything?" Ezekiel turned to face him, his expression calm but piercing. There was something unnerving about the way he looked at people, as if he could see straight through them. Ryan faltered for a split second, but quickly recovered, his smile widening. "I'd like some water," Ezekiel said simply, his voice steady and measured. Ryan nodded exaggeratedly as though humoring a child. "Of course, sir, right away." He spun on his heel and disappeared toward the kitchen, leaving Ezekiel standing there. Moments later, he returned carrying a glass half filled with what appeared to be murky liquid. Not quite water, not quite clean. Ezekiel raised an eyebrow when Ryan placed it on the table with a flourish. "Here you go, sir," Ryan chirped, his grin dripping with mockery, fresh from the tap. Nearby patrons reacted differently. Some chuckled nervously, while others averted their eyes, unwilling to acknowledge what had just happened. One man shook his head slightly, murmuring to his wife, "That poor guy probably doesn't even realize." His voice trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Ezekiel, however, remained unfazed. He stared at the glass for a long moment, then set it down without touching it. His fingers brushed against the rim lightly, deliberately slow, as if savoring the absurdity of the situation. "You know," Ezekiel said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "water usually comes in clear form." Ryan froze, his confident smirk wavering. For the first time since they'd interacted, uncertainty flickered across his face. He opened his mouth to respond, but Ezekiel continued before he could speak. "And tomorrow, this entire staff will answer to me." The words landed like a thunderclap, silencing the room completely. Every eye turned to Ezekiel now, disbelief etched onto faces. Ryan laughed nervously, trying to regain control of the situation. "Oh, right, sure thing, boss," he sneered, though there was a hint of unease beneath the bravado. Ezekiel didn't respond. Instead, he locked eyes with Ryan, his gaze unwavering. It was a look that said more than words ever could, a promise, a warning, and a challenge all rolled into one. Ryan swallowed hard, breaking eye contact first, but his smirk returned moments later, shaky but defiant. As Ezekiel walked away, the weight of his parting words lingered in the air. Patrons whispered amongst themselves, speculating about who he really was and whether his claim held any truth. Ryan stood frozen for a moment longer, watching Ezekiel leave, his mind racing. Was this man bluffing, or was he truly someone important? Either way, Ryan decided he wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. Little did he know those words would haunt him sooner than he imagined. Ezekiel arrived early the next morning, ready to step into his role as the new owner of the Velvet Fork. The restaurant was quiet, save for the clinking of dishes in the kitchen and the occasional murmur of staff preparing for the day. But the calm shattered the moment Ezekiel walked in. Heads turned, whispers erupted, and eyes widened with disbelief. Some employees stopped what they were doing altogether, openly gawking at him. Ezekiel could feel their shock radiating off them like heat waves on asphalt. They hadn't expected this. Him. Mr. Whitaker stood near the host stand, fidgeting with a pen as he watched Ezekiel approach. His reluctance to hand over control was evident in every stiff movement, every strained word. "Everyone," Mr. Whitaker began, his tone clipped and condescending. "This is Ezekiel Hayes. He'll be taking over as the new owner." The announcement hung heavy in the air, met with stunned silence. No one clapped, no one smiled. Instead, skeptical glances passed between staff members. Mr. Whitaker didn't bother hiding his disdain either. As he handed Ezekiel a stack of papers, he muttered under his breath, "Let's hope you know what you're doing." Ryan Caldwell felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. One minute, he'd been smirking about the audacity of some guy walking into the Velvet Fork, like he owned the place. The next, that same guy actually did own it. For a split second, Ryan froze, his confident smirk slipping away entirely. But then, almost instinctively, he forced it back into place, masking his panic with defiance. As Ezekiel moved through the dining area, introducing himself briefly to each employee, Ryan lingered at the edge of the room, watching carefully. When Ezekiel reached him, Ryan plastered on a fake smile and extended his hand. "Congratulations, boss," he said, letting the last word hang awkwardly. Ezekiel shook his hand firmly, meeting his gaze without flinching. There was something unsettling about the way Ezekiel looked at people, as if he could see right through their facades. Ryan swallowed hard but kept his expression neutral. By lunchtime, rumors were already spreading faster than wildfire. In the kitchen, Vanessa Cole leaned against the counter, rolling her eyes as she listened to Ryan rant. "I'm telling you, there's no way he bought this place fair and square," Ryan insisted, pacing back and forth. "He probably bribed someone or worse, got involved in something shady." A few others nodded along, eager to believe anything that justified their discomfort with Ezekiel's presence. "Maybe he just worked hard," Marla Thompson interjected sharply, cutting off Ryan mid-sentence. She'd been quietly observing Ezekiel all morning, noticing small changes he'd started implementing, like revising the schedule to give everyone fairer shifts and addressing complaints about tip distribution. Ryan scoffed at her suggestion. "Hard work doesn't buy restaurants like this," he shot back, glaring at her. "Face it, Marla, guys like him don't belong here." Marla crossed her arms, unimpressed. "And who decides where someone belongs? You?" Her voice carried an edge of warning, silencing Ryan momentarily. Still, the damage was done. Lines were being drawn among the staff, those who sided with Ryan out of fear or bias, and those who stayed silent, unsure of what to think. Tension simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. Later that evening, Ezekiel sat alone in his office, poring over documents left behind by Mr. Whitaker. At first glance, they seemed routine. Financial reports, inventory lists, staff records. But as Ezekiel dug deeper, patterns emerged that made his blood run cold. Hiring practices skewed heavily toward white applicants. Wage disparities revealed blatant racial bias, and even customer reviews appeared falsified to target minority patrons. Each page painted a clearer picture of how Mr. Whitaker had maintained the restaurant's elitist image, not through excellence but through exclusion. Anger burned in Ezekiel's chest, but it wasn't enough to blind him to the reality of the situation. This wasn't just about personal vindication anymore. It was about dismantling a system built on prejudice. He knew exposing these truths wouldn't be easy, especially when internal sabotage continued to undermine him. That became painfully clear when Marla knocked on his door later that night, her face pale with urgency. "You need to see this," she said, handing him her phone. On the screen was a viral post from Ethan Graves, a notorious gossip blogger, known for tearing down reputations. Attached to the article were old photos of Ezekiel, photos implying involvement in illegal activities. Ezekiel stared at them, his jaw tightening. These images weren't real. They couldn't be. And yet, comments poured in accusing him of fraud, deceit, and worse. "It gets worse," Marla added hesitantly. "Vanessa gave them to him. She thinks discrediting you will make things go back to normal around here." Ezekiel exhaled slowly, processing the betrayal. He should have seen it coming, should have anticipated the lengths people would go to protect their fragile status quo. But knowing the truth behind the photos struck a nerve. After some digging, Ezekiel discovered they'd been staged by a rival investor who'd tried, and failed, to acquire the Velvet Fork himself. Revenge, it seemed, came in many forms. Despite the mounting evidence against him, Ezekiel refused to back down. Public scrutiny intensified, fueled by social media outrage and false narratives. Protesters gathered outside the restaurant, holding signs that read, "Kick out the fraud." Online trolls attacked him relentlessly, questioning everything from his qualifications to his character. For the first time since stepping into this role, Ezekiel allowed doubt to creep in. Could he really overcome this? Was fighting worth the cost? But then he remembered why he'd taken on this challenge in the first place. Not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Ezekiel clenched his fists, determination blazing anew. If they wanted a fight, he'd give them one. But on his terms. The pressure mounted with each passing hour. Ezekiel stared at his phone, scrolling through endless streams of hateful comments and accusations. Social media outrage had reached a fever pitch, fueled by Ethan Graves' viral article and Vanessa's leaked photos. Protesters gathered outside the Velvet Fork, their signs screaming, "Kick out the fraud." The restaurant, his dream, his hard-earned victory, was now a battleground, its doors closed temporarily as Ezekiel struggled to regain control. This was rock bottom, and he could feel the weight of failure pressing down on him. Inside, the chaos wasn't any less intense. Ryan seized the opportunity to rally the remaining staff against Ezekiel, holding court in the break room like a self-appointed leader. "If we stick together, we can get our jobs back," he promised, his voice dripping with false confidence. "He's not going to last long, not after everything comes out about him." Some employees nodded along, desperate for reassurance. Others shifted uncomfortably, torn between loyalty to Ryan and hope that Ezekiel might still prevail. The team was fractured, distrustful, and on edge. Amidst the turmoil, Marla found Ezekiel holed up in his office, staring blankly at stacks of documents. She knocked softly before stepping inside, closing the door behind her. "You're not alone in this," she said firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her words were simple but carried immense weight. For the first time in days, Ezekiel allowed himself to breathe, to believe that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't fighting this battle alone. Together, they dug deeper into Vanessa's betrayal. Late into the night, they combed through emails, financial records, and old communications until they uncovered undeniable proof. Vanessa had been paid off by Ethan Graves to orchestrate the smear campaign. It wasn't just about discrediting Ezekiel. It was about protecting the status quo, no matter the cost. Armed with this evidence, Ezekiel made a decision. He would face the world head-on, exposing the truth once and for all. The next morning, cameras flashed as Ezekiel stepped onto a makeshift stage outside the restaurant. Reporters jostled for position, shouting questions over one another. Ezekiel raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "I called you here today to address the lies being spread about me and about the Velvet Fork," he began, his voice steady. Despite the storm swirling around him, one by one he presented the evidence: Vanessa's payoff, Mr. Whitaker's discriminatory practices, and the falsified reviews targeting minority customers. Each revelation hit like a sledgehammer, forcing the audience to confront uncomfortable truths. But it was the security footage that truly silenced everyone. As the video played, showing Ryan sneering, mocking Ezekiel, and deliberately contaminating his drink, gasps rippled through the crowd. Online viewers reacted instantly, flooding social media with apologies and support for Ezekiel. Overnight, public opinion shifted dramatically. What had started as a campaign to discredit him turned into a movement rallying behind his fight for justice. Just as Ezekiel thought the worst was over, Ryan burst into the press conference, his face flushed. With anger, "You think you've won," he shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Ezekiel. "You're nothing but a fraud." His tirade was cut short when a police officer stepped forward, handcuffs gleaming under the harsh lights. "Ryan Caldwell, you're under arrest for assault," the officer announced, reading him his rights. Marla's hidden camera footage had captured every detail of Ryan's initial insult and act of sabotage, leaving no room for denial. As Ryan was led away, Ezekiel stood tall, his expression unreadable yet undeniably powerful. The journey from humiliation to victory had been grueling, but he'd emerged stronger because of it. Turning slightly, he caught Marla's eye, offering her a small, grateful nod. Without her quiet resolve and unwavering support, none of this would have been possible. In that moment, amidst the chaos and triumph, Ezekiel felt something he hadn't dared to feel in weeks: peace. Justice hadn't come easily, but it had come, and that was enough. Ezekiel stood at the helm of the Velvet Fork, determined to rebuild what had been broken. With Ryan arrested and Vanessa fired, he took full control, implementing sweeping reforms designed to dismantle the systemic racism that had plagued the restaurant for decades. Diversity training sessions became mandatory for all staff, teaching them not only about inclusion but also empathy. Equitable hiring practices were introduced, ensuring fairness in every step of recruitment. Wage disparities were addressed, and transparent policies replaced the old, biased systems. Slowly but surely, the toxic culture began to shift. Some former doubters approached Ezekiel privately, expressing regret for their earlier skepticism. "I didn't mean anything by it," one server admitted sheepishly during a quiet moment after service hours. Ezekiel listened patiently, his expression calm but guarded. While he appreciated their apologies, he knew words alone couldn't undo years of prejudice. Trust would take time he was willing to invest, but cautiously. Marla Thompson stepped into her new role as Ezekiel's right-hand woman with quiet confidence. Her sharp instincts and unyielding support made her indispensable in transforming the Velvet Fork into a model of inclusivity. Together, they reviewed applications, hired diverse candidates, and fostered an environment where everyone felt valued. Late one evening, as they wrapped up another long day, Ezekiel turned to Marla. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said sincerely. Marla smiled, brushing off the compliment modestly, but there was gratitude in her eyes too. Their partnership wasn't just professional. It had become deeply personal, forged through shared struggles and triumphs. One afternoon, a letter arrived from Mr. Whitaker. Ezekiel opened it with trepidation, unsure of what to expect. Inside, written in shaky handwriting, was an apology. "I was wrong," the note read. "The way I ran the Velvet Fork perpetuated harm, and for that I am truly sorry." Ezekiel stared at the words, stunned, but the real twist came when he learned the rest of the story. Mr. Whitaker was terminally ill and had decided to leave his fortune to charities fighting racial injustice. It was a shocking act of redemption, one that forced Ezekiel to reconsider his feelings toward the man who'd once dismissed him so condescendingly. Under Ezekiel's leadership, the Velvet Fork transformed into more than just a restaurant. It became a symbol of hope. Families of all backgrounds filled its tables, laughing and sharing meals together. Employees worked side by side, united by a common goal of creating something meaningful. The newly renovated space reflected the inclusive spirit Ezekiel had envisioned, Warm lighting, art celebrating diversity, and menus featuring cuisines from around the world. Every detail spoke to the change Ezekiel had fought so hard to achieve. On a crisp autumn evening, Ezekiel stood outside the bustling restaurant, watching through the windows as patrons enjoyed themselves. He thought back to the challenges he'd faced, the insults, the lies, the protests, and marveled at how far he'd come. Despite everything, he'd refused to give up, driven by a belief in justice and equality. As he gazed at the vibrant scene before him, a voiceover echoed in his mind. Change doesn't come easy, but sometimes justice serves itself in ways no one expects. For viewers tuning in online or hearing his story retold, Ezekiel's journey resonated deeply. His experience served as both a reminder of the barriers still standing and a testament to the power of resilience. In the closing moments of the narrative, a call to action emerged. Have you ever faced discrimination like Ezekiel? Share your story in the comments below. We want to hear from you. For those eager for more, the promise of another inspiring tale lingered. If you thought this was shocking, wait till you see our next story. And finally, a plea for collective action. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to spread awareness and inspire change. As the story concluded, its message lingered, a beacon of hope in a world often clouded by prejudice. Ezekiel's victory wasn't just his own. It belonged to anyone who dared to stand against injustice, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, transformation was possible.